Good afternoon and welcome to Lunchtime series, proudly powered by leadershipbydesign.co, where we aim to add value to people's lives. Guys, you can listen to us live every Wednesday and Thursday at lunchtime on ebizradio.com, where we talk about everything leadership, coaching, and marketing. And you can listen to the latest Lunchtime series on all your major podcast channels today. And in today's coaching segment, we have a really interesting guest who's going to be joining us. When we first spoke about this, I mean, I'm aware of it, but I don't know as much as she does. But she's also known as. Welcome to the show, Monique Linder. How you doing, Monique?
Thank you, Kevin. Thanks for having me. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for making some time to chat to us. I remember when we first had a bit of a conversation, the topic was so interesting, and I was like, yeah, we definitely need to talk about it. And I think so many people tend to want to avoid this conversation. But before we get into that, tell us more about you. What is it that you do? And give us some insights about you.
Yeah, so my name is Monique Linder. I'm originally from Germany, and I'm also known as the Time Alchemist. You've probably said that before. And well, what is there to know about me? Really, so much actually. I don't know where to start, but the rundown is that I help people to reclaim their time, to increase their energy, and to save their sanity. And I do that with Time Alchemy, which is a combined holistic approach to time management, to leadership, to mindset, and to energy efficiency. And I do this basically internationally. I'm also a speaker and I travel a lot. I have been traveling for 17 years, 7 of them full time. And I'm also on the autism spectrum. So there's a lot, that comes together, and it's really exciting and overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah, I'm sure. Just and tell us about, that's where we really started having this conversation is, being on the autism spectrum.
Yeah.
How is that how have you sort of discovered that was part of who your personality is, and that's who you are, and how do you use that to enhance what it is you do today?
So 3 years ago, when the pandemic started, I was here in Thailand, where I'm at right now again, and I started writing a book. I wrote a book about my framework, which is called the Time Method, and I started writing it, and I was able to just really focus on it. I blacked everything out basically, and it was really interesting because I started to feel like, wow, lockdown life is kind of my life. And then suddenly my editor, who's also a good friend of mine, love her, shout out to Tyler Rose, and she started kind of making some suggestions, like as in funny but also not so funny, about have I seen this meme about how lockdown life is the typical life of autistic people, and I'm like, oh, yeah, this is how I feel. And we started making more jokes, and she started pointing out more and more things about how I was working with her, how I got overwhelmed, how I got stressed about little things and didn't want to accept certain changes that weren't actually that big. And then I said, like, well, my sister is autistic, but she only found out like 3 years prior. And then she looked at me and she's like, and you're not? And I'm like, well, I don't know. No one ever told me, kind of,
Yeah.
And it went just on, and I went down a rabbit hole of just researching what is autism actually, because in the world, and it's currently still very stereotypically portrayed, especially in the media, especially online, especially from the people who research autism or talk about autism in a professional manner, right?
Yeah.
And the way they portray autism is autism is a disability. Autistic people throw temper tantrums, and I cannot tell you how wrong that is, but that's basically what they say. We cannot look people into their eyes. We don't actually speak well. We're dumb as fuck. Sorry for my language, but that's legit what people portray us as. And we are simply just not smart enough to exist in this society. And that's really like, I obviously made it a little bit more traumatic, but honestly, that's what comes together, right? And the more I dove into researching it, and especially also other neurodiversities, because people don't know that Tourette is a neurodiversity, that dyslexia is a neurodiversity. They don't know that. They think like, oh, it's just someone doesn't know how to read and write. No, it's not. It's how the brain processes information differently, and that there are circuits in our brain that either are much faster than information can be processed or much slower, and hence there is a delay in processing, which is not really a delay, it's just how it works different. Or that for dyslexia, for example, dyslexic people are not stupid, they can read and write, but their brain takes in information in 3 dimensions. That means visually, in pictures, in 3D objects, and all of the things. So a P and a B looks very similar, so they mix it all up. And it's actually not that they don't know how to read write. It's just simply that their brain puts it into shapes and forms and visuals and pictures, and hence they mix up letters, for example, because letters are not 3D, they're 2-dimensional, right?
Yeah.
And so the more I found out about it, also about ADHD, because that's a neurodiversity too, the more I found out, like, hey, first of all, it's not a disability, number one. It's just not. And I want to say that's my opinion, okay? Because there are people who like to actually be, how do I say that? Identify as a person with a disability, because also their need for support is much stronger. So then they need to be able to apply for funds for disability support and things like this, which in my case is not the case, and hence is why I don't identify as a person of a disability or with a disability. And I don't believe that autism itself is a disability. I think what leads to a person on the spectrum or a neurodiverse person not having the support they need is what leads to the learning disability or the nonverbal causes of autism and all the other things. Autism itself is literally just the difference in how our brain processes information.
So, I mean, today's topic, we're looking at, neurodiversity in business and leading and be led with neurodiversity. Don't you want to, why talk about this? Why do you think it is important to bring this conversation to the foreground? And, from your perspective and just listening to what you've already said about this, people have such a skewed version of what autism and dyslexia could be, or essentially means for anyone in the world. But why have this conversation, and why is it important for us to be able to have this in business as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. Kevin, I think a lot of entrepreneurs that start businesses, they get to a point where they either have to make a decision to keep on going solo and just run a solo show, or to keep hiring people, right? Because at some point, growth is stalled by how much you can do. Now, if you hire people, chances are high that you hire someone with a neurodiversity. And here's the fun part about it. Well, I don't know how fun it is, but I think it's funny. Most of the people with neurodiversities don't even know they are neurodiverse, because, and that's just a fact. I'm not trying to politically get into discussions with that, but the fact is that so far in the medical realms of research, of science, of anything, over 80% of research has been done on cis white men overall in the world. And so that is in mental health terms, that's in neurodiverse terms, that's in medical terms, that's in surgery terms, so everything. This is why we have problems, for example, for women to get proper mental health care, proper menstrual care, because the research has been done on men, and don't we know that the research can't be done on men for women's care, right? And so the same is with neurodivergence, though, because the symptoms and the way it affects people is like neurodivergency. Let's just talk about autism for now, because I'm autistic. I know best about autism. So autism in me as a white adult woman looks different than autism in a Black man. And it looks different than autism in, for example, an Asian woman for example, in Singapore. Or it looks different than a child in Africa. And it looks different for every single one. And we need to have more research done, first of all, from people who are autistic. And we are out there, don't worry. There are scientists, there are doctors. We're not stupid. We're just not addressed properly. And the thing is that chances are you definitely will have a neurodiverse person on your team, may you know it or not. And knowing the science of it and knowing how to treat them, but also knowing how to get the best out of this person, this is what you want. And you want this with every single person. You want this whether from a cultural viewpoint, right? Or from a racial viewpoint, or from just from a human viewpoint. You want to treat your team like a human and not just like a machine to bring you some numbers in.
Yeah, and I think that's lends itself to why we're having this conversation, because there's not enough. I mean, I know that I'm dyslexic, but I don't see it as a disability. I often mix up numbers, so I have to, there's a method that I've learned to actually relearn information around how I use numbers. And very often when I'm quite specific, because I create a lot of content. I have checking mechanisms in place to help me check my dyslexia, but it doesn't purely based on the fact that, like you say, just because I have it, I don't feel like I'm less of a capable person. But essentially, how does this show up in business for us? Because I think, like we've unpacked some of it now, in terms of what it is, and there's more. I think that there's more to it than we think we realize, because there's not enough studies done on it. And usually we when we say autistic, or when we say, anything to that degree, it's always to the furthest degree, or we make it a far larger or bigger problem. Like, I must say this in inverted commas, because people sometimes look at it as a problem, but I think with more education, more conversation, more moments like this, we learn better and we learn more about it, right? So, but how does this show up in business for us? And what are some of the telltale signs that you have neurodiversity happening in your work environment, or in your team, for that matter?
Mm-hmm. So one thing I want to start with is the spectrum itself, because a lot of people think that the spectrum is linear, whereas that's not how it is. So we also want to get away from the terms like high functioning and low functioning autism, for example, because that's not such a thing. Like, you are autistic or you're not. And high functioning and low functioning is somewhat of a degrading term that is often used to say if that person is functioning well in a neurotypical world versus functioning not so well in a neurotypical world. But in society, and that's a lot of my opinions and my beliefs, but in this society, we need to get away from believing that neurotypical is the standard, and that's what we want to conform to. We want to make diversity the standard, so that everyone has a place and everyone is the norm, or no one is the norm, right? So an autistic person doesn't have to mask and function highly in order to be accepted. And so if someone is nonverbal, they still can be a genius, and many of them are, because they have other either special interests, for example, or some of the people who are nonverbal are extremely highly intelligent. They just don't tell you about it because they don't want to speak to you. And so they have other forms of expression than their voice, and we need to accept that and let them be how they want to be. So how this turns out in business was the question. And so, for example, there are similar there are some common traits that autism, let's say, have, and it depends. I explain it always like a cake. So imagine you have a big cake with like 8 pieces or 12 pieces or whatever, and every single piece is a certain trait that one of like you have. Be it neurotypical or not, right? And so now the question is, how much of the piece of the cake did I bite off or not? So if I bite off a lot of the piece, then I may have quite a lot of troubles with that particular trait. And if I didn't bite a lot of that cake, then I don't have a lot of trouble. And so one of the very typical thing is like social skills, looking people in the eyes, or reading social cues. So I'm very good with looking people in the eyes, but please don't ask me to decipher any social cues. I have no idea. I'm oblivious to whatever is going on for neurotypicals in between the lines every single time. And it can be hilarious, but can also get me into trouble because people who are not on the autism spectrum want you to read those signs, right? If I ask, how are you? And you say, I'm fine, but you're not. You want me to read that you're not based on the tone you use, but you said you're fine. I take this literally.
Very typically, it sort of points to the non-verbal cues that you're not picking up. So some people pick up the in-betweeners and the non-verbal cues where neurodivergent people may not necessarily pick up those small little cues in communication.
Exactly. I'm absolutely oblivious to that. And every single time I'm stunned how people try to get this across to me. And like, I have my best friend here. We just laugh about this because she told me about 3 different situations that she was with me and in a conversation with another person, she would be like, you didn't get that? I'm like, what did I not get? This is, I'm like, no, when did this happen? What was the point? What was said? What did I miss? And she looked at me like in distress. She's like, how did you not get it? I'm like, I'm autistic. It's like, legit.
How does this affect like productivity, for example?
I think it affects more the communication in the workplace, right? Because my productivity is actually pretty good. I want to say I'm often more productive than other people because I'm not, like, I have a hyper focus that other people don't have. I'm also extremely good with organization, planning, structure, habits, because autistic people love structure and habits, routines. Not all of them, in general. And I particularly love it. So it comes handy with my work. But so with communication, if I had someone as a leader or just in my team who are not aware that I'm autistic or who don't really understand the levels of it, and they keep passively sending those in between the lines, I will be oblivious and they get really frustrated. And so the communication must be very clear, very concise, very straight to the point, and not beating around the bush. No, but I thought I told you. No, you have to actually tell me, like, exactly what you want. Not, fluffed up in candy floss, but really actually tell me.
So this could be lost in communication. It could be lost in and it might be lost in social skills. What are there any other areas that people could maybe pay attention to or start noticing where people may be neurodiverse? Are there any other tell signs that they are?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to try to make it shorter because I know I love talk a lot, which is one autistic thing. I give a lot of context so that can go out and out. So a lot of autistic people, but it can also be with ADHD. The difference, though, is autistic stick with one for a longer time than ADHD, is special interests. So if you keep hearing someone talk about a certain topic that you may not be interested in, but they repeat themselves over and over and over again, and they go rabbit hole deep, that can be one sign of it.
Yeah.
Sensitivities. Most autistic people have a sensor sensitivity. Touch, light, smell, taste, noise. Noise is the most common one. If you feel or if you recognize that someone is especially like, shrinking together or in shock and they hear loud sound, or they say they have pain, and you need to take this serious, because if an autistic person says they get physical pain from noise, for example, or from touch, it's true. It is true. It's not something we make up. It's actually true. And you just need to reduce the fucking volume. Like, you just need to be a little bit sensitive to that, even if you cannot imagine how this works.
Yeah.
I get nerve pain from being in cold air condition and from noises. And so I have to make sure, if I go to loud places or whatever, to take noise canceling headphones. Another one is executive function that people sometimes miss out on. So that means they can be extremely high functioning, and now I said it, but extremely well functioning, that's what I meant, in a business, but not doing their laundry and not being able to cook and not being able to do anything at home really. And what the other way around. And then you say, but why can you do this type of organizational task, but not that type? And it's because that's how the brain processes. So if, for example, that one task is one of their special interests, they can hyper focus on it and easily just do the task, even though you may think it's more complicated. Whereas laundry seems to be so easy, but it may be so boring to them that the brain can simply not even comprehend how to get the task started. So those are a few different traits. And in business, I think if you have someone who asks questions, for example, all the time, why do you want me to do this way? Why can I not do it another way? Why is it like all the why questions all the time? Chances are they may be neurodiverse as well, because and that is for both ADHD and autistic people. They need to understand the reason why they need to do something in order for them to make sense of it. Otherwise, they simply can't really do the task. And I used to run into big troubles back in Germany in my corporate career because my bosses simply didn't want me to ask those questions.
Just listening to you now, I think I might actually be neurodivergent because I am highly sensitive to sound, and I'm highly sensitive to light as well. So it's and I'm quite aware of it as well. For me to function, I need a certain type of light. I need sunlight very often. I need to be near the, like outdoors. I'm very specific about a lot of things, which is just listening to you now, I'm kind of going, oh wow, I better go and check this out. But I mean, how do we make a difference when we lead people? So no matter how neurodiverse or what specifically it is, but how do we then lead people differently? What are some of the ways that we can actually do this so that we actually show up differently as leaders in our business environment?
Yeah, I think the first thing is to not invalidate people. So do validate them. Even though that's not your experience, even though you have no idea how that person could experience such a different reality from yours, do say, it's valid. I may not understand it. I don't know what's going on for you, but it's valid. Like, what you experience is real, and I believe you. Because that's the most underrated thing someone can say to you,
just to say, like, I see you, I hear you, and I want to help you, but I need you to tell me how I can help. Because that other person most likely won't know how to help. So that neurodiverse person must be able to at least voice a certain form of a need or something that can be done in the moment to support. And we practice this a lot. I think most of the neurodiverse people practice this, because I don't know how often I go outside and I ask, like, excuse me, can you turn the volume down? Can you please turn off the air conditioner? Would you please do that? Like, the amount of times I have to do this in order to exist in this world without a meltdown is quite often, you know. But the thing is, as a leader, if you would invalidate this person, you basically invalidate the whole experience of their life. And you tell this person, and I have this experience so many times as well. Oh, come on now, you're being too sensitive. You don't get pain from it. That's stupid. I mean, if I get $1 for every time I hear this, I would have been a billionaire, more than Jeff Bezos.
I hear you, yeah.
Right? Or like, the light is not too bright, I need to see something. Well, okay, but I'm getting headache, you know?
It's funny that you say that, because I've, since I was a teenager, I don't go anywhere without sunglasses. So, I mean, I wear these when I'm working, but when I'm outside, even when it's cloudy, I'll have sunglasses on. And people like look at me like, the sun's not shining, right? And I'm like, yeah, but I can't stand the glare of the clouds. The glare of clouds it physically gives me headaches. So just listening to you now, I grew up in an environment where I was, my family, completely devaluated the fact that I was experiencing pain. And they were going, oh, you're just so sensitive. You're just so sensitive. And I'm like, yes, what do you want me to do about it? And I'm so glad that we're bringing, sort of shining a light on this conversation, because I think just because we're experiencing a certain kind of something doesn't mean that other people are experiencing it our way. And we need to validate, what people's personal experience is about their environments and how they transmute and translate information.
Yeah. And the thing is that for example, I experienced quite a few of those things much later, because in Germany we just don't have air condition. In Germany the lights weren't that bright, because I mean there's just a lot of things that came much later for me, because I went full under the radar in Germany with my autism, because also some of my traits are kind of very German as well, always being on time, change is not very welcome, like, don't question anything. All of these things is just very German as well. So even my German friends these days, when I said like I was autistic, they're like, now you're just extra German. And it's funny, they were not trying to undermine me, but they were like, those sound like German traits. So with this validation part, it's really important to just understand that our experience in this world, whether you're neurotypical or not, autistic or non-autistic, is not someone else's experience. Everyone experiences this world differently, right? And so as a leader, the best you can do is validate it and then ask questions, instead of saying like, okay, I'm going to turn light off, or okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. That probably is going to be too overwhelming this moment. You just ask first a very specific question. Do you want me to turn the light off? Don't ask, what can I do? Well, in this moment, we're so overstimulated, we don't know. So we need specific yes/no questions. Do you want me to turn the light off? Yes, please. Can I turn the volume down for you? Oh, that would be great. Thank you. Do you need a cold drink? No, but a warm one would be nice. Like, we need very specific questions, because, again, the brain processes information differently. For an autistic person, we process information, let's just say, okay, here's how it works for autism. Do you mind if I explain it? I'm going to ask before that.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so the difference is this. For autistic people, we have more neural pathways on a neuron, which means all the information that comes in is much more amplified for us. Everything is lighter, brighter, louder, smellier, tastier, everything. So we are much easily overstimulated. Now, for a person with ADHD, they need extra stimulation in order for them to stay in focus mode, or in like, because the brain always wants to go back in survival mode, right? They need the extra stimulation. So it's the opposite kind of than autism, but they have a lot of overlapping symptoms nonetheless. So dyslexia, I explained already. You see, like in visuals, you read in 3 dimensions and so on, and hence, like the reading and writing, if it's numbers, if it's letters, if it's whatever you can see in flat form, basically in 2D, that's where you can mix up a lot of things. And Tourette, for example, is where, I'm gonna try to explain it, please don't pin me down on the correctness of it, but where information gets basically stuck and led into it's almost like there's like a traffic jam in your brain, and then either a certain phrase or a certain tick is going to manifest in releasing that traffic jam. And for most people, it's with how's it called, swear words or whatever. And why swear words, I'm not really sure, to be honest. So I would have to research it more. But those are just a few different examples, and they're all different in how the brain processes, right? So if you have an ADHD person in front of you, you want them to procrastinate throughout the day on different things that they're really interested in order to be more productive. Whereas an autistic person, you want them to have their space perfectly kind of like designed for themselves in order to not be distracted and just go hyper focus.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that's so interesting because, like you're saying, you know, they're 2 different areas of the brain that people function from differently, but they do overlap. It's really interesting. If you could give us, you know, because I think a lot of people, and you know, I work with corporates all the time, and time management and attention focus.
Oh, okay. I think got stuck again. That's all right.
Yeah, going on. Cool. So just to recap on the time management tips for people with ADHD and for autism, what tips would you leave us with for today?
Okay, so ADHD, do not plan ahead too far. So the best that you can do for people with ADHD is plan your day ahead the evening before. So plan your day. Wait, how's the saying? Plan your
day.
So in the evening, plan it day tomorrow. Plan it tomorrow today. Plan it tomorrow today.
Yes.
That was heavy. So in the evening, you can also even do this in the morning, because sometimes it's even better the shorter before you do it. And you sit down and you really want to choose the three main tasks that will move the needle forward the fastest. And needle movers are, is it going to make you money? Is it going to make you time back? Time back is like delegation or systemization or automation, things like this, right?
Yeah.
Or team management, team leadership, stuff like that. Or is gonna basically create a evergreen system for you, which means is going to make you money ever create in the long run, like creating courses, information, online content, things like this. And this is not a direct money maker, but it's probably a indirect one. So 3 tasks that will move the needle the most. And so with these 3 tasks in between, you want to schedule time for procrastination for an ADHD person. So how you do this is you choose 15-minute slots in between those tasks. And most of the people with ADHD, they need a break after 1 hour. Most of them, not all, most of them. 45 minutes, sometimes best is Pomodoros, 25 minutes, and then set a 5-minute break. And I recommend to just get up, stretch, get water, something. Sometimes you want to sit on your, I don't know, TikTok app or YouTube or whatever it is. And with a 5-minute timer, you want to go down your rabbit hole in 5 minutes as far as you can. You know, follow that special interest. I don't know, watch all the shorts you can watch in terms of your, whatever you're into it now. And that can change every day for a person with ADHD. So that's the best. And also compartmentalize your days. So just an example, Monday is admin day with emails and accounting and whatnot. Tuesday is socials and content day. Wednesday is client work day. Thursday is recording the videos for all of your courses day. And Friday is catch-up day. That's just an example, but really compartmentalize based on topics, because your brain does need a lot of time to switch in between tasks. So the less you need to task switch, the better. Okay, autism. So for autism, the longer time you can focus on one task, most of the time is better. It also depends on the person with autism, but if you can give yourself an hour or 2 hours to focus on one task, go all in. Remove distractions, put your phone away, let the dog out to pee before you start, and all of the kind of things. And then go all in and focus on this one task. Make sure you have written out what the steps are to follow this task. So break down your task into steps and just follow the steps. Make sure that the tedious tasks for a person with autism are on days where your energy is already not the highest. And that doesn't seem to make sense, but here's the thing. Most tedious tasks are tasks that you don't actually need to think about a lot, but they take you a lot of energy. So if you don't need to think about it a lot because you know how to do them, they're just tedious. You want to do them in a lower energy state because you don't need to think about them, but you just need to do them. So you do them on days where your energy is already a little low and you can just rest afterwards. So that's what I recommend.
I love it. Yes. And I think that's really good tips, because I think that, when you put them in those 2 categories, it makes sense for, why a person with ADHD really needs that kind of help and why autism really needs that kind of help. And I'm as you're talking, I'm definitely like thinking of my day here going, this makes sense, right? I love this. We've already, Monique, we already run out of time. But so, I mean, if you could lastly, if we could just discuss, in summary, what you want people to take away from today's discussion, and then just leave us with, where can we get hold of you? Because, I'm sure lots of people would want to find out more and hear more about you.
Okay. So I just want people to understand that neurodiversity is, in my eyes, not a disability, it's a superpower. And we just need to know how to hone it. And if you have someone in your life, or if you are the person with a neurodiversity, get to know that neurodiversity and use it as much as you can for your benefit. Because I promise you, the moment I found out, everything changed for me and I got so much more powerful in my work as well. So that's the one thing I want people to know and understand, and maybe take away, to not be afraid of it and to not see people as, disabled or other them, just to see them as super humans, like we all are. And yeah, go ahead.
No, and then where can we get hold of you?
Yeah, thank you. So my website is the best point of contact. It's thetimealchemist.co. And you can find me on Facebook with the same name after the slash. So facebook.com/thetimealchemist.
Fantastic. She's a time alchemist, guys. She's a coach, she's a consultant, she's an author, she's a change maker, at least. And that's Monique Linder. Thank you so much for joining us, Monique. Absolutely fascinating conversation, and it's definitely something to make me think about. So I'm definitely going to go checking out more about it. Thank you for joining us, and I will chat to you soon.
Thank you so much, Kevin, for having me, and have a wonderful day.
For now.